My daughter told me I wasn't presentable enough to be in her wedding photos, said I could come, but only if I stayed out of the main shots. So I stayed home, and I kept the check I was going to give her in my pocket. Let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Richard Wright from Alaska. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. My name is Ray, and I build things with my hands. Cabinets, porches, staircases that don't creak. The kinds of things most people don't notice until they're broken. I've made my living sanding edges smooth and fixing what other people thought was beyond repair. For 37 years, I ran a small carpentry shop behind the old bank on Pine Street. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. There's pride in that. There's also a kind of quiet loneliness, the kind you don't feel until someone tells you you're not presentable enough to be in your own daughter's wedding photos. It happened 3 days before the ceremony. I had driven out to the vineyard they'd rented. White chairs in perfect rows, wildflowers everywhere, a pergola I could have built better myself. Ava was standing with the photographer, pointing at a chalkboard sign that said, "No phones, just love." She waved me over, all smiles, and for a second I felt good, like maybe I belonged there. Then she pulled me aside, just out of earshot, her fingers brushing her bracelet like she was rewinding something in her head. She didn't look me in the eyes when she said it. "Dad, I know this is weird, but for the official photos, the group shots and stuff, I think it might be better if you sit those out. Just the formal ones. It's about the aesthetic, you know? Clean lines. Pastels. I know you don't really do that kind of look." Her voice trailed off, like she expected me to fill in the blank. And I did. I looked down at my hands, rough, thick-knuckled, stained with 40 years of wood dust. I was wearing my only suit, the one from my brother's funeral. She was right. I didn't fit. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why Daniel's uncle with the gut and Hawaiian shirt was fine, but I wasn't. I didn't point out that the photographer had taken candids of me wiping tears away during her rehearsal vows, or how I'd spent the last year budgeting groceries so I could gift her $30,000 to start her new life. Instead, I smiled the way I do when a client says they're going with IKEA instead, and said, "Sure, sweetheart. Whatever you think's best." That was the last thing I said to her face before her wedding. The check stayed in my pocket. I didn't show up to the ceremony. I left her a voicemail that morning. Said I was feeling under the weather, didn't want to risk spreading anything. I kept it light. No guilt trip. No dramatics. Just enough space for her to believe whatever story she needed to. I imagined her walking down that aisle, scanning the seats for me, wondering if I'd still come. I hoped, for her sake, that she didn't look too hard. Because I wasn't there. I was in my workshop, revarnishing the same oak beam 3 times just to feel like I still had a reason to move. Nobody called to check on me. Not her. Not Daniel. Not her mother, who'd remarried and spent most of the reception dancing like she was 25 again. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the same one Ava used to crawl into when she had nightmares, and unfolded the check. I looked at the numbers. $30,000, and thought about the first job I ever took. I was 16. Replacing a deck for a man who paid me in cash and cans of Coke. I folded the check back up and slid it into my top drawer. Over the next few days, I started packing up Ava's old room. It wasn't an act of anger, more like clearing out a museum. Soccer trophies, pressed flowers, birthday cards I'd kept even when she forgot mine. I boxed it all up and moved it to the attic. In its place, I installed shelves. Bought myself a real desk. Turned the room into a study I never needed until now. Some nights I'd sit there just to breathe in the quiet. Not the silence of being alone. The silence of no longer pretending you're not. I didn't respond to her thank you card. It came a week later. A folded photo of her and Daniel laughing mid-spin, glitter still stuck in the crease. "Wish you could have been there," she wrote. "Hope you're feeling better." There was a heart after the exclamation mark, like punctuation could soften the bruise. I put the photo on the fridge for a day, then took it down and filed it under miscellaneous in a drawer of loose receipts and expired warranties. She looked beautiful. I couldn't stop thinking about how easy it was for her to erase me. I think what got to me most wasn't that she didn't want me in the photos. It was how casual it was for her. Like brushing lint off a sleeve. Like my absence could be edited out the way you crop out strangers from vacation pics. But I wasn't a stranger. I was the man who built her crib, hand-cut every spindle, who drove her to school in the snow when her mom couldn't be bothered, who taught her how to tie her shoes by looping the laces around her thumbs like bunny ears. But I didn't fit the aesthetic. You ever been told you're welcome, but only if you stay invisible? It messes with something deep inside you. Makes you question every moment you thought you were enough. Makes you wonder what version of yourself they saw, and when they stopped seeing the rest. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was shelved. Like something you keep for sentimental reasons but don't want on display. I told myself she was just caught up in the moment. That weddings make people weird. But some part of me knew. You don't say something like that unless you've already made peace with losing someone. So I stayed home. And I kept the check in my pocket. The first week after the wedding, I told myself I'd give her time. Maybe she'd call. Maybe she'd realize what she said, how it sounded. Maybe she'd feel it in the photos, the gap where I should have been. But time passed like wood warping in the rain. Slow, irreversible. She sent one more message, a short one. Hope we can talk soon. Love you, Dad. That was the first time she'd said love you without a comma in years. No punctuation, no pause. Just a phrase tacked on like a doormat. Something you wipe your feet on before walking in. I didn't write back. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I knew anything I said would sound smaller than what I felt. You can't fit betrayal into a text bubble. It leaks out the sides. Instead, I went quiet. No phone calls. No visits. When her mother called to ask if I was still sulking, I said nothing. Just let the silence stretch until she hung up. Silence has weight, if you let it. People think noise is what hurts, but it's the space around the words that makes you bleed. And I bled quietly. I started waking up earlier. 5 a.m., before the world could get loud. I drink my coffee black and sit at the kitchen table, staring at the spot where Ava used to set her cereal bowl. I could still see the mark where milk always splashed over, a little ripple in the wood, pale and permanent. I never refinished that part of the table. It felt wrong, like scrubbing away evidence of something that mattered. But now it just felt like a stain. I ran my thumb over it every morning, not really thinking. Just remembering. Or maybe unremembering. After the second week, I cleared out the rest of the upstairs. Turned the guest room into storage. Sold the old couch. Every room I touched lost a little bit of her. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about reclaiming space. There's a kind of grief in being edited out of your own family. A quiet kind. The kind that doesn't cry, just builds. You carry it like lumber on your back, piece by piece. Eventually, it becomes a house you live in. I was building mine. Not out of revenge. Not yet. Just to survive the quiet she'd left behind. Then one day, I opened the drawer where I'd kept the check and stared at it for a long while. I hadn't deposited it. Hadn't torn it up either. It was a symbol now. Of what could have been. Of what wasn't deserved. I started journaling that night. I hadn't done that since the divorce. First line I wrote, erasure is not the same as forgetting. One is passive. The other is surgical. I kept going. Not about her directly, but about dignity. Legacy. Being seen. I wrote about my father, a mechanic who died with oil on his hands and no one at his funeral but me. I wrote until my fingers cramped. It felt like carving again, just without the sawdust. Every word had weight, and slowly, the entries started shaping something inside me, not a plan, not yet, but a posture, a way of standing taller in the space she thought she'd hollowed out. I bought new tools, reorganized my shop, started mentoring a neighbor kid whose dad left a few years back. Just 3 afternoons a week. I didn't offer. He just showed up. Quiet kid. But he watched the way I measured angles, how I smoothed out corners, and started mimicking my movements like muscle memory. His name was Eli. 12 years old, eyes like a forest fire, dark, smoldering, but alive. He didn't ask questions. Just wanted to build something that wouldn't fall apart. I gave him scrap wood and let him fail, over and over, until his hands started moving like they belonged. One day he asked if I had any kids. I paused. I had a daughter, I said. She's grown now. That was all I said. He didn't press, but he nodded, like he understood the space between had and have. Like maybe he had that same space somewhere in his chest too. Weeks passed, then a month, then two. Still no call. I heard about her new apartment through the church bulletin. They'd donated to a registry. Pots and pans, throw pillows, coffee table books no one ever reads. No mention of me. No. Thanks to Dad for helping us start our new chapter. Just a pastel-filtered Instagram post with the caption, "Home is what you make it." I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. Because home was what I made. Every floorboard, every cabinet. I'd built her childhood with my bare hands. And now I wasn't even footnoted. One afternoon, I walked past the bookshelf in what used to be her room, now my study, and noticed a cracked spine on a novel she'd loved as a kid. Tuck Everlasting. She made me read it when she was 9. I picked it up, flipped through the pages, and there it was, a pressed daisy between chapter 12 and 13. Brittle, but still intact. Like a secret trying to stay alive. I didn't cry. I just closed the book and placed it back exactly as it was. Not everything needs fixing. Some things just need to be remembered. The silence became a rhythm. Not empty. Just mine. I went to bed without waiting for the phone to ring. Ate dinner without picturing her at the other end of the table. You don't get to unmake someone's presence and expect them to still orbit you. That's not family. That's performance. And I was done performing. Some nights I drive out to the edge of town where the land gets flat and the sky opens wide, and I just sit there in my truck, engine off, listening to nothing. You ever been in that kind of silence? Where it presses against your ribs like a second heartbeat. That's where I decided something. I wouldn't chase her. I wouldn't beg to be included. She didn't want me in the frame, fine. But she didn't get to act like I was still in the picture. From now on, I'd live like someone who'd stepped out of it. And maybe, just maybe, I'd start building something new. Something no one could crop me out of. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Because a man deserves to be remembered in full, hands, flaws, sawdust, and all. 3 years. That's how long it had been since the wedding. Long enough for most people to forget. Long enough for wounds to scab over and pass for skin. But some wounds don't scab, they sink. Quietly, slowly, under everything you do. You learn to live around them. Like a missing tooth you keep tonguing out of habit. I hadn't spoken to Ava in 1,127 days. I know because I wrote down each one in the corner of my journal. Not out of obsession, just acknowledgement. Like notching time served. Because that's what it felt like, a sentence, not a silence. Then came the letter. Not a text, not a voicemail, a real letter. Cream envelope, Ava's handwriting on the front, a little looser than I remembered. Inside was a photo and 5 lines of neatly spaced ink. This is your granddaughter, Nora. She's 6 months old. I'd like her to know you, if you'd like that too. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just an olive branch without roots. I stared at the picture for a long time. Chubby cheeks, wide eyes, Ava's chin. She looked up at the camera like she didn't know yet who she was supposed to become. I didn't reply. Not right away. I pinned the photo to my bulletin board above the desk. Not out of sentiment, but curiosity. Every morning I'd glance at it, then go back to work. The house had become a fortress of new habits. Morning coffee, long walks, weekly woodshop sessions with Eli, who was now taller than me and calling me Pops, like it meant something. He didn't know about the letter. He didn't need to. That part of my life wasn't dead. It was just suspended. Like a breath you hold during a storm you know is going to pass. A week after the letter came, I was asked to attend a community award banquet. They were honoring local mentors. I almost didn't go. The idea of clapping for myself felt ridiculous, but Eli begged me, said I deserved it. That night, I wore the same suit Ava had called off aesthetic, but I'd tailored it. It fit better now. I'd changed, even if the fabric hadn't. When I walked into the banquet hall, I wasn't expecting her. But there she was, sitting in the 3rd row, holding a diaper bag and a baby bottle like they were shields. She didn't wave, didn't stand, just watched. I felt her eyes on me like a draft through a cracked window. I accepted the plaque with a short speech. Sometimes the best thing you can build is a person who doesn't need you forever. People clapped. Ava didn't. Or maybe she did. I wasn't watching her. I didn't speak to her afterward, just walked past, nodded once, and left the hall before the applause had finished echoing. I could feel her behind me, waiting for a sign, a glance, a breach in the wall. But some walls hold, especially the ones built out of omission. Later that week, she sent another letter. Longer this time. She wrote about sleepless nights, about how motherhood humbled her, about how she sees me in Nora's stubbornness, in her refusal to be held when she's angry. She asked if we could meet. No pressure, no expectations. I folded the letter and placed it beside the first one. Then I picked up the frame from my desk and looked at the photo of Ava on my shoulders when she was 5 State Fair, cotton candy in her hand, both of us laughing like we had forever to stay that way. I didn't meet her, but I didn't ignore her either. Instead, I made moves that didn't include her, but reflected her absence. I took Eli to his first college tour. Gave him one of my watches. Started referring to him as my kid when strangers asked. Not to replace Ava. Nothing could. But to remind myself that love didn't need to sit in a curated frame to be real. Sometimes it looked like teaching a boy to stain pine evenly, or reminding him that being abandoned once didn't mean he had to build his life around the vacancy. Ava found out about Eli. I don't know how. Probably through church gossip. One day I came home and found a small envelope on my porch. No letter inside. Just a photo. It was Nora, holding a block of wood with a lopsided heart carved into it. On the back she'd scribbled, "She wants to learn." That sentence broke something open in me. Not forgiveness, but softness. The kind that leaks into your chest when you realize the future isn't holding a grudge. It's holding a hammer and asking what it's allowed to build. I still didn't reply. But I left something out front the next day. A toy plane. Handmade. Smooth sanded wings. No note. She took it. That's how the resurfacing started. Not with a grand apology. Not with some teary doorstep reunion. But with silent gestures. Careful acknowledgments. Like two people sweeping away debris from opposite ends of the same ruined bridge. I started leaving things out for Nora, a puzzle, a wooden duck, a tiny step stool with her name etched underneath in small letters. I never saw Ava pick them up. But each time, by morning, they were gone. The space between us wasn't closing, exactly. But it was changing. Less like exile. More like mutual, cautious repair. I didn't tell Eli. Some things stay compartmentalized for a reason. He asked once why I kept building toys when I didn't have grandkids. I told him, sometimes it's easier to shape wood than people. But I try anyway. He nodded, like he understood. Maybe he did. That's the thing about kids. They don't need the whole story. They just need consistency. And I gave him that. Because even when you've been pushed out of one life, it doesn't mean you stop being who you are. You just build somewhere else. With new blueprints. And sturdier nails. That fall, I got a formal invitation to Nora's first birthday party. Ava had typed it up. No handwriting this time. The envelope was addressed to Grandpa Ray. She didn't ask if I'd come. She just left the door open. But I didn't walk through it. Not yet. I mailed a present, a hand-carved jewelry box with a mirror inside. And underneath the lid, I burned a single line into the wood. One day, I'll tell you who made this. And why. That was the first time I let myself hope again. The night of Nora's birthday, I sat in the driveway for 13 minutes. I'd driven all the way there, clean shirt, wrapped gift, even combed my hair, but couldn't bring myself to walk to the door. Through the window, I saw shadows moving. Balloons strung up along the porch railing. Little party favors scattered like afterthoughts. Daniel opened the door for someone carrying a crock pot. Ava was there too, smiling that performance smile. I didn't recognize it at first. Not because it had changed, but because it hadn't. Same teeth, same tilt, same effort to make joy look effortless. I put the truck in reverse and drove home. Left the gift in the front seat like a passenger I couldn't talk to. Inside was a small wooden toy chest, custom-made for Nora. Inside that, a tiny envelope, not addressed to Ava, or Daniel, or even Nora directly. Just a single word, maybe. I never mailed it. Never explained. Because maybe is sometimes more powerful than yes or no. Maybe gives people room to regret, to grow, to choose again. And that night, I needed that room. More than I needed cake or small talk or forced reunion pictures. The next morning, I found a new letter on my porch. Short. No photo. Just Ava's handwriting again, smaller this time. I saw your truck. I wish you'd come in. But I understand why you didn't. No guilt. No begging. Just an opening. Like a crack in a door you once nailed shut. I didn't write back. But I did walk upstairs to the study and finally take down the old photo of her on my shoulders. Not because I stopped loving it, but because I was tired of looking backward every time I sat down to work. A week later, I was at the hardware store when I saw her. Ava, in the garden section, holding a hanging fern and arguing quietly with herself. She didn't see me, and I didn't speak. Just stood behind a stack of mulch bags and watched her. Not in a creepy way, in a studying way. Like trying to recognize a song when the lyrics have changed. She looked older. Not worn, just weathered. Softer around the eyes. She held herself differently, like someone who had learned, the hard way, not to take up too much space. And that recognition hit me harder than I expected. She turned suddenly and saw me. Eyes wide. No makeup. No pretense. For a second, we just looked at each other. Not with shock or embarrassment, but a strange, tentative stillness. Then she spoke. One sentence. "You look good, Dad." I nodded. Said, "You too." We didn't talk long. 5 minutes, tops. She asked if I wanted to come by sometime. Just you. Just for coffee. Nothing big. I told her I'd think about it. And I did. For 6 days. On the 7th, I showed up. Not with a gift. Not with a script. Just myself, and that was enough. She'd cleaned the house. You could tell by the way everything smelled like citrus and nerves. Nora was at daycare. Daniel was at work. It was just us. The kitchen was newer. Cabinets I didn't build. Countertops I would have chosen differently. But the light was warm, and Ava had laid out 2 mugs, mismatched. One said "Number 1 Dad," a joke, or a peace offering. Maybe both. We sat, awkward at first. Then slowly, like old tools being picked up again. Familiar. Rusted. Still usable. She asked about Eli. I told her he got into trade school. She smiled, genuinely. Then she said it. "I want to say I'm sorry, but I know that's not enough." I didn't answer right away. I looked at her the way you look at a house after a fire, trying to decide what's still standing and what needs to be knocked down. "Do you even remember what you said to me?" I asked. She looked down, nodded. "I said you weren't presentable. For the photos." Her voice cracked a little on presentable, like the word had finally turned on her. I let the silence hang, not as punishment, as space. For once, she didn't try to fill it. I told her how it felt. Not with anger, not with dramatics, just the truth. "You told me I could come to the most important day of your life, but only if I didn't show up as myself. Do you know what that does to a man?" She said nothing. So I kept going. "You didn't just crop me out of the pictures. You cropped me out of the memory. Like I wasn't someone worth remembering." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't interrupt. Didn't apologize again. She just listened. And I realized then, this wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity. She asked if I'd ever forgive her. I told her forgiveness wasn't the question. "You need to ask yourself if you want the truth," I said. She looked confused. So I clarified. "The truth is, I didn't come to hurt you. I stayed away to protect myself. Because once you show someone you're willing to disappear to make them comfortable, they'll ask you to do it again. And again. And again." She nodded, tears now falling without fanfare. She didn't reach for me. And I didn't reach for her. We just sat there, in the stillness, like survivors. When I got home, I opened the drawer with the check again. It was still there. Creased. Yellowing. Useless now. I burned it in the fireplace that night. Not out of spite, but because it no longer symbolized what I was willing to give. It symbolized what I'd withheld, and how long I'd carried it, thinking I might still hand it over one day. Letting it go felt like exhaling after holding your breath for years. I didn't tell Ava I burned it. Some things lose their power the moment you speak them aloud. This wasn't for her. It was for me. That week, I started building something new in the shop. Not a toy. Not a cabinet. A bench. Solid oak. Wide enough for 2. I didn't know why at first, just felt right. Something about offering a seat, even when you're not sure who'll sit in it. Maybe one day Nora would. Maybe not. But it would be there. A space carved out in good faith. A place to rest. Because after everything, all the silence, all the erasure, all the edges worn thin by regret, I was still a builder. And I still believed in leaving room for return. I didn't plan the confrontation. That's the thing no one tells you about reckoning. It doesn't come with fanfare or thunder. It shows up quiet. Worn shoes. Calm voice. And it comes when you're already tired. Ava called that morning, asked if I could come over. Just to talk. No pressure. But her voice had that edge. Like she'd already decided something, and I was the last checkbox before she could feel better about it. I said yes. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I finally had no desire to protect her from who I'd become. The living room was the same. A little cleaner. Softer now, like she was trying to stage her life for Grace. Nora was drawing in the corner, humming to herself, her whole world still unbroken. I watched her for a moment before I sat down. Ava offered tea. I declined. She sat on the edge of the armchair like she wasn't sure if this would last 5 minutes or 5 hours. Then she said, I want to talk about what I said. About the wedding. I know we've danced around it for years, but I need to face it. I didn't make it easy. Not out of spite, but because easy was what got us here. All right, I said, folding my hands in my lap. Let's hear it. She looked stunned for a second, maybe expecting me to ease her in. But I wasn't that man anymore. She took a breath. I wanted everything to be perfect. And in my head, that meant curated. Clean. You were never anything but real, Dad. But I thought real would ruin the photos. I didn't realize how ugly that sounded until I saw them. And you weren't in them. Her voice cracked again. It hurt. That's when I finally asked the question I'd been swallowing for 3 years. Why was I the one that didn't belong? I could feel my voice tighten, the restraint around it. Daniel's cousin wore Crocs. Your mom's boyfriend had a vape pen clipped to his pocket. But I was the eyesore. She flinched. It wasn't about how you looked, she said quickly. It was everything. You carry your whole life on your face. I thought people would look at you and ask questions I didn't want to answer. About Mom, about money, about how hard things used to be. That was the first real truth she'd said. I nodded, slow and quiet. Then I looked her in the eye. You don't get to tell someone they can be part of your life, but not part of your story. I didn't survive all of it just to be your invisible man in the background. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I kept going. I built you. Not with money. Not with smiles and polite Christmas cards. I built you with my time. My mornings. My broken back. And you tossed all of that because you thought my hands might smudge the memory. Nora dropped a crayon. The sound was tiny but sharp, like punctuation. Ava stood up, walked to the window, then turned around. I was ashamed of where I came from. That's the truth. Not of you. Of how I thought people would see me if they saw you. And that's mine to carry, not yours. I stood up too. Not to fight. Just to match her posture. No, I said. You handed it to me that day. You said, hold this shame while I get married. And I held it. Until it crushed everything I ever thought I was to you. She started to cry then. Not the silent kind. The ugly, shoulder-shaking kind you do when you realize you can't undo something. I didn't comfort her. I didn't offer a tissue or a hug or a lie to make it pass. I just let her stand in it. Because reckoning doesn't mean kindness. It means truth. And truth is rarely gentle. After a minute, she looked at me through tears. What do I have to do, Dad? She asked. To be in your life again. To matter. I waited before answering. Then I said it. You don't need to matter to me. You need to matter to yourself. Stop performing. Stop curating. Stop offering love like it's a subscription people have to qualify for. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. And if I do that, she asked, if I really change? I looked at her for a long time. Then maybe we'll start something new. Not a return. A rebuild. But I won't go backward. Not for you. Not for anyone. She nodded. She understood. Not just the words, the stakes. I think, in that moment, she finally saw me not as a father, but as a man. We didn't hug. We didn't take a selfie to prove anything. We just stood there, with everything laid bare between us. Like a table finally cleared after years of unspoken rot. Then I told her something I hadn't planned to. I burned the check, I said. The one I was going to give you for your wedding. 30 grand. I held on to it for 3 years. She looked like I'd slapped her. But I wasn't finished. I kept it not because I wanted to give it to you, but because I wanted to believe you'd become someone who deserved it. She didn't respond. Just nodded. That nod carried more than any "I'm sorry" ever could. Before I left, I knelt down and looked at Nora. "Hey," I said softly. She looked up. I handed her a small wooden ring box, just a scrap I'd carved the night before. Inside was a single key. "It's for something I'm building," I said. "You can't use it yet, but one day you'll know what it opens." She beamed, like kids do when they're handed mystery without obligation. She didn't need an explanation, just the promise that something was waiting for her, built by hands that never stopped making space, even when they were pushed out of the frame. As I walked back to my truck, I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but seen, understood, not by the world, just by myself. That was enough. It started with a photo. Not a new one, an old one. One Ava must have found buried somewhere, maybe in a shoebox or a drawer she hadn't opened in years. It arrived in the mail, unannounced. No note, just the picture. Me holding her on my shoulders at the state fair, cotton candy stuck to her cheek, my face mid-laugh. I don't even remember what was funny. But it's there, joy, unedited, uncurated. No pastels, no filters, no planning. Just a moment that survived everything that came after. She'd put it in a new frame. Oak, clean, unstained, unfinished. She was giving me a blank frame. For 3 days, I didn't hang it up. Just kept it on the workbench, next to a jar of screws and a strip of sandpaper. I ran my fingers along the edge, thinking about how many frames I'd built over the years. For mirrors, for family portraits, for diplomas no one hung. But I'd never framed something for myself. I always thought legacy was something other people decided for you. Something said at your funeral or printed in a program. I never realized it could be something smaller, quieter, like the decision to stop begging to be remembered and start choosing what to remember. I finally hung it in the study, not center stage, just to the left, near the window, close enough to catch morning light, but not the first thing anyone would see. It wasn't for visitors. It was for me, for the version of myself I'd almost forgotten. The man who lifted a little girl onto his shoulders and made her laugh like the world hadn't broken her yet. A man who wasn't aesthetic, but was present. Fully, messily, unapologetically. The next week, Ava brought Nora over. It wasn't a holiday. No occasion. Just a quiet Saturday where time felt soft around the edges. They came with muffins. Nora ran into the shop like she owned it. Her fingers went straight to the carving tools, eyes wide, curious. Ava watched her like she was seeing two ghosts, the daughter she was, and the man she tried to erase. "She's not afraid of the sharp stuff," Ava said. I nodded. "Neither were you." She didn't answer, just smiled. We spent the morning teaching Nora how to hold a sanding block. She covered herself in dust and called it magic. After they left, I stood in the empty doorway and realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not because everything had healed. Some wounds don't close. They just stop asking for attention. The scar becomes part of your blueprint. That's what people don't understand about revenge. It's not about winning. It's about returning to yourself. Taking back the parts they said were too much, too rough, too unlovable, and holding them up like proof. You see this? This is what survived you. The bench I'd been building for months was finally finished. Solid oak, no nail showing. I carried it to the backyard and placed it beneath the old dogwood tree. It used to be Ava's favorite spot. She'd sit there reading books too big for her age, pretending not to listen when her mother and I argued. The tree had grown since then, thick and blooming. The bench fit like it had always been there. I carved something into the side, just small enough that you'd miss it if you weren't looking. Seen, even when erased. A week later, Ava found it. She didn't say anything, just ran her fingers along the words, then sat down. For a long time. I watched her from the porch, didn't say a thing. She was crying, quietly. The kind of crying you do when you realize your father didn't hate you. He just finally respected himself too much to keep chasing someone who couldn't see him. She waved as she left. Didn't say goodbye, just nodded, like she understood what that bench really meant. And then, 2 days later, she did something that knocked the air out of me. She posted a photo online of me, sitting in the shop, stained apron on, sanding a toy for Nora. No filters, no edits, just real light and dust and decades on my face. The caption read, "This is the man who built me. Every rough edge, every corner of strength. I cropped him once. I won't make that mistake again. I stared at it for a long time. The comments rolled in. Old friends. Strangers. Words like integrity, wisdom, the kind of father I wish I had. But I didn't care about the noise. What mattered was that she put me back in the frame. Publicly. Not for performance, but as reparation. Not a perfect act, but a real one. The kind that costs something. The next day, Nora brought over a new drawing. Stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands. She'd drawn the bench too, and in her clumsy scrawl, 3 words sat under it. This is ours. That did it. That broke me. I held her close, not just because she was mine, but because she didn't know any of this history, not yet. She just knew love when she saw it. And that was the whole point. I wasn't building legacy for the past anymore. I was building it forward, quietly, one frame at a time, one moment at a time. I don't know what kind of woman Ava will grow into from here. Maybe she'll still retreat into her polished world sometimes. Maybe she'll never fully understand what those missing wedding photos really cost. But I know this, she changed. Not for me, for herself. And that means something. That means everything. Now, every morning, I sit on that bench under the dogwood tree and drink my coffee slow. I watch the sun climb the fence. I hear birds argue in the branches above me. And I feel peace. Not the kind you earn. The kind you choose. No parade. No applause. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I didn't stay erased. I reclaimed myself. Frame by frame. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you've ever been cut out, overlooked, or had to walk away to protect your peace, you're not alone. I tell stories like this every day. Real. Quiet. Honest. So if you felt this one, hit subscribe. Stick around. There's more. See you soon in the next one.